next speaker really dovetails that well from a different perspective, not a Chicago perspective, but very much a Midwestern perspective. Terry Bassam is the chairman, president, and chief executive officer of Great Plains Energy and Kansas City Power and Light. As chairman, he is the only management representative on the board. Effective 2012, he became the president and CEO. He has served as president and chief operating officer, also achieving tier 1 performance in safety operations and customer service prior to being the CEO. He's been a CFO. He has been an executive vice president of utility operations. Terry was instrumental in leading KCP&L through its comprehensive energy plan, which was an ambitious plan. I think some of you will remember, but some of the things that have happened in the United States, KCP&L has been some of the first to do it. The renewable portfolio standards, the first utility in the Midwest to really actively support them was KCP&L. The Green Impact Zone has been significant to give others a vision of what success looks like when you have that community enablement at the center of what your utility is about. He has helped transform KCP&L's business through the sales of strategic energy and the acquisition of Aquila, which doubled the company's workforce and significantly increased its service territory. But prior to joining KCP&L in 2005, Terry actually was a Texas utility CEO. And so as a Texas headquartered research and publication firm, Zpryme, it's been quite nice for us to be able to hear his perspective from the Midwestern angle as well as the Texas perspective. He serves on several boards, including the Guadalupe Center, the Kansas City Symphony, similar to here, the United Way of Greater Kansas City, the Chamber, the Civic Council, the Library, and a group named Win-Win, which I think everyone should look up. They're great. It's Win/Win. It's a central exchange initiative. And without further ado, I introduce you to Terry Bassam. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. I'll be sure and write a shorter introduction next time. But thank you very much for that generous introduction. And thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you about what I know you would agree is a critical part of the success of our country in the future, the infrastructure we know as the electric grid. Let me start by saying something, make a simple statement. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I'm excited about that. I've been in the business about 30 years, started out as an attorney and then moved within the company and have taken on different roles since then. And I know every speech you go to, you hear people say, well, this is the most exciting time ever in our industry. This is the most turmoil ever in our industry, the most changes in our industry that we've ever seen. So I'm not going to miss an opportunity to say the same thing. And I think it's true. I think that's probably why you're here and why you're interested in this topic is I have never seen as many things that are causing a basic change to how we operate our business, a business that's operated for 100 to 130 years. And things are changing that are going to make us do things differently. Things you've already heard about, things you'll continue to hear about, I'm sure, load growth. I don't have to tell you about load growth, but we see our load growth flattening across the industry. Kansas City's got a pretty good load growth profile, but that's about 1%. Imagine that. Think of the days when you thought that would have been a great load profile. Costs continue to rise, though. So as we continue to see load growth flatten, we don't exactly see our budget shrinking. We, like every other industry after 2008, began to cut cost, work down our total head counts, but we continue to see now costs rise that we have to pass through rates and don't control, such as SIP standard cost, other costs that we don't have the ability to say no to, but after several years of cutting cost, we have a limited amount of cost cutting while still providing that tier 1 service that we think is incredibly important and which our customers want to see. We also have uncertain regulation. We have not only EPA regulation, which continues to be uncertain and very costly, but we also have state regulation which is trying to gather and understand what's happening in our business and balance the needs of shareholders and customers while allowing us to provide the kind of service that I think we all expect to happen. So this conference is going to address a lot of issues around innovation and around invention, but I'm not going to talk about that for my few minutes with you here today. I'm going to talk about people. I'm going to talk about culture, and I'm going to talk about leadership, which I think is the most important part of what we're going to have to deal with as we move through this change in our industry. I've thrown up here just a simple little slide. It's my only slide. Many people would talk about it in different ways. They'd call it different things. They'd categorize it different. But this is a way to kind of think through the history of our industry. For 100 years, as a traditional utility, we provided a customer service profile that looked a little like this. You call when you need service. We hook you up. We send you a bill. And then we're going to come back and cut you back off if you don't pay that bill. Now, I'm sorry to say that's kind of our customer contact cycle for most of our history. And that's part of our culture. Our folks are excited about customer service. But their view of customer service has traditionally been reliability, which is critical. But it's not the same thing we're talking about today. So think about it this way. We have a company plane. It's called Southwest Airlines. I've seen a few on my company plane, by the way. I need to talk to you about that. But think about going to the airport, walking through security, handing your ticket to the agent, walking on the plane, and then leaving. Not waiting on who's on the plane, not waiting on anybody else who might want to go somewhere else, no connections, leave immediately with no other concerns. That's the electric industry. You flip your switch, whether you're at your house or you're a large customer, our duty, our job, is to provide you with everything you need right then. Think about what that would mean for Southwest Airlines if that's what they had to do. Be a lot more airplanes, a lot more people, a lot more infrastructure. And that's exactly what we have. We have the infrastructure to provide not only what you want, but a little more. Because if you use a little more, we have to provide it. Now, the good news is there's value in that grid. There's value in that process that comes from having that reliability. Of course, the first and most important part is we have the most reliable, cost-efficient electrical system in the world. But above that, we have the ability to grow, and we have the ability to add on and make part of that grid new things, because that's exactly what's happening. So as we move today, I would say that I would consider our industry and other utilities in the second category, socially responsible. Over time, what we've done is obviously always been part of our community, but we've also had to deal with the EPA. And for a long time, EPA, other regulations we would really push back on. We begin to work harder at working with the EPA, working with the other environmental and issues that we need to manage in an environment where we know the environment is critical to all of us. KCP&L was mentioned earlier. 10 years ago, we needed new generation. We had not had generation for 20 years. New nuclear plant put us in that position. No rate cases, and we needed new generation. So rather than a typical planning process, which would put us in front of the commission, get an approval, build, and then ask for recovery, we met with our constituents. We went and met with our customers, our regulators, our political leaders, and we said, we need new generation. We want to be meeting our requirements, but we want to know what you want. Well, oddly enough, what they wanted was a big new coal plant. But they didn't want the emissions for our fleet to increase. So after 10 years of executing on an agreement, we have a brand new 800 megawatt supercritical coal plant, but the emissions for our fleet are no greater than they were the day we started. But for carbon, obviously. But we've installed equipment early. We installed renewables, started energy efficiency programs, and that program has gone very, very well for us. We have just finished the last installation of environmental equipment that would complete that 10-year agreement, and we're in rate cases to finalize it right now. That process for talking to our customers, though, is what's critical. And that's what we need moving forward. Because moving forward, where we're at is a consumer-centric utility. And this is the struggle. Because we can't just go talk to customers and do. We have regulatory requirements, we have regulatory approvals, we have processes. But the key for us is to be focused on the customer, be focused on what they want, and they want a lot more and a lot of different things that they haven't in the past. So how do we do that? Back to people. We don't need more electrical engineers. For all the engineers in the room, I love you and we need electrical engineers, don't misunderstand me. But what we need is human engineers. We need people who know how to communicate with people, who know how to deal with people, who know how to work with complicated issues, complicated regulations, and figure out how to come up with good solutions. And I know you all know this, but human engineers are a lot harder to develop than electrical engineers are. It flows through our entire company, our entire hiring process. I was with our interns about a month ago, and half of our interns for the summer were from IT. 3 years ago, I'm not sure we had an intern from IT. Our systems, our needs, marketing, social engineering, social communication, who would have thought that we would have been dealing with outage information over our social networks? But that's the way people communicate to a large segment of our customers. And that is different than what we're used to dealing with, and yet we've got to make sure that we're focused on that. So we've been looking at things back to the grid that make sense from a customer perspective. One is energy efficiency. I know there's a lot of energy efficiency been done by utilities, but for us, about 10 years ago, we focused on energy efficiency as an investment just like a generator. Working with our regulators, working with our legislators, actually, to get legislation that said investment in energy efficiency should be treated from a regulatory perspective just like steel in the ground. So we recover those costs, marketing and otherwise. We recover our investment in those systems with our customers, and we earn on them, and we even achieved some level of lost revenue recovery so that we're actually fully paid for, if you will, our investment, and we get to invest in our customer as opposed to investing in usually a remote piece of ground in our service territory somewhere. We also are focused on a couple other things that I think are really critical to the grid infrastructure. Our most recent is electric vehicle charging stations. And we're very excited about this new development in the sense that we're the first to announce a fully integrated piece of infrastructure, if you will, that's on our side of the meter and we manage for charging vehicles. It's interesting that this would be kind of an odd conversation, but when people ask why, you know, we sell electricity. So obviously the delivery method to your house has been in place for hundreds of years, but we also have an obligation, we think, to serve mobile sources. So a customer has a car, we have an obligation to serve them. So our belief is that we need to look to opportunities to provide that service in a way that gets people comfortable with the use of an electric vehicle. So if you ask anybody in the business, the key for success and the thing that'll move us forward is removing what they call range anxiety. So instead of having certain buildings which say, I'm going to go get some electric charging stations because it's good for marketing, or maybe the boss has an electric vehicle and so he wants one and so he gets a few installed, we need to figure out how to make this a systematic process. So working with Nissan and some of our other partners in Kansas City, we announced the first ever system-wide infrastructure add to our T&D system, or our D system, our distribution system, distributed throughout the city in a way that we could manage and assure that it would be placed in a way that would be the most helpful to encourage electric vehicle sales. We're very excited. Things have been going very well. We've actually put our first piece of that cost into a rate request, so we've got to work through the regulatory process. By the end of this year, we'll have 1,100 charging stations, which serve around 10,000 vehicles. And as a result, we should be in a position to be able to remove the range anxiety for anybody that owns a car in Kansas City. And we're already seeing the effects from our car dealers. And it's incredible the response we get from our hosts as well. They're very excited, again, about engaging with the customer. And it's funny because they're engaging with their customer as well. So we're reaching to what the customer wants, but our hosts are doing the same thing. They know people want to have vehicles and they want them connected to, if you will, their time spent at whatever business that they provide. So in the end, utility business model disruption. So what does all this mean for the grid? Are utilities kaput? Are we done? No, I don't believe so. And I'll tell you why. The only reason we would need a complete disruption, I believe, is if we as the industry are not responsive enough to our customers' needs. Because again, our grid provides the kind of reliability that makes our system work. And when you talk about distributed generation, obviously it's distributed from the grid. We're trying to put back to the grid different ways to provide that service, but in the end, without the grid, we can't provide the kind of reliability that we've come accustomed to and that we need. So what does that mean for us as utility executives and for us in the business? We have to continue to be leaders in solutions. Historically, we would really push back and fight against any change. That's not what customers want, and that's not what's the best way to go at this. And so I think as we move forward, our key is to get more involved in what our customers want, not just reliability, not just standard service, but they want to know how their service is being provided, how their generation's being generated, and when and how they can help control it. And we have to be part of that, and it's complicated because we're going to have to work with our regulators on how to do that, work with our shareholders. Communication is the key when it's all over with. Back to the people aspect. We've got to communicate with our customers. We've got to communicate with our employees. We've got to change the culture of our companies. We've got to communicate with our regulators. We've got to communicate with our legislators. And we have to communicate with our shareholders. Change produces risk, but also produces opportunity. And that's why I'm really excited about the change that we're faced with. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate being here, Drew. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Man, thank you. That was wonderful. Really appreciate it.